When I was growing up, when I was a kid growing up, and again when our kids were little and growing up, one of the favorite times of the week was Sunday when the newspaper came out, because the paper would come out and it had the comics section in there, and that was the first thing that as kids we wanted to read, not the headlines, not the front page, not the editorials, but the comics. What was going on in the comics? What was happening with our favorite comic strip character? And there were certain ones that we looked forward to. It's kind of funny as a kid growing up, because some kids liked one or two comics and other kids didn't like those, and just completely the opposite. So sometimes we would get together and we could compare notes. Well, why do you like this one? Why don't you like that one? Interesting how different we can be. But there was one comic strip, and I think it's still in existence today, and it was very endearing, and it was called Family Circus, and it was about a young family with several small children, and the cartoons or the theme running through the strip was about just the adventures of growing up with a family, just the adventures of having little children in the home, and how they kind of bring us to see things through a different light. They're so precious in their observations and their outlooks, and just the way that they are. And there was one Sunday that I remember that the little one comes home, and the mom says, "Where were you?" And the little one says, "Well, Mom, I came straight home from school." And then the next panel of the comic strip shows the path that the child actually took, and they left the school and they kind of wandered, around the block, and they went to the playground, and then they wandered around someplace else, and then they went to the candy store, and then they wandered someplace else, and then they went to the toy store, and then they swung by Grandma's house, and then finally they came home. Now, in their mind, they maintained a straight path. They came straight home from school. But in actuality, their little curious mind took them all over the place. They wandered all over the place. Now, eventually they got home, but the path was not as direct as they thought it was, and it was not as efficient as they thought it might be. And while, it's amusing and it's cute to think of the children and how they do that, we all do that. See, we all do that. It's not just the children who do that. We all do that. In the East, the teachers use kind of the simile of following a stray dog when it wanders. Following a stray dog when it wanders. Our mind is like a stray dog that wanders, and we being the I amness or the consciousness that we are, we tend to follow it, and we let this stray dog lead us wherever it happens to go. Wherever its nose takes it, wherever its instincts take it, that's where we follow it. We had we had several dogs as the children were growing up, and they were great escape artists. I don't know how they did it, but they, no matter how high we made the fence, how deep we dug it under the ground, how securely we made the gate with springs to pull it closed and all these kind of things, somehow they would get out. And of course, the first few times it happened, it was panic. Everybody's going a different direction and look different ways and take the car around the neighborhood and all these things. But finally, I figured it out. Just check the wind. Just check the wind. If you stick your nose in the air, whichever way the wind is coming from, that's the way the dogs went. See? Because they would follow their scent. And once they got out, and once they got their freedom, whatever the wind carried to them, see, that's what caught their attention. And that's where they would go. And they would wander off, and they would find something to smell, and they would spend some time smelling that, and then the wind would come and carry something else, and they would go off, and they would go off. See? Just follow the wind. So the teachers use the example of kind of untrained consciousness, untrained mind, untrained awareness, as being this sort of flitting thing, this thing that goes from one place to another, like a stray dog. But there's another part of the consciousness, you see, and that is the part that is following the dog. Why are we following this wandering dog? In other examples, you'll hear the term the monkey mind, you know. So the mind is kind of like a monkey, just swinging through the trees in the jungle, just going from here to there to everywhere, and flitting all over the place. And again, we follow it. We follow that monkey mind. We let it dictate where we're going to go by following it. And I think many times we don't even realize we have a choice. You see, we don't have to follow it. We can just let it go, let it go its own way. You know. Another example might be the grasshopper mind. Remember the TV show Kung Fu with David Carradine? You know, the master called him the little grasshopper, my little grasshopper. And the reason for that is that, you know, again, the grasshopper will flit from here to there to there. It's steady in one place, and it looks like it's going to stay there, and all of a sudden, boom! It just with a great leap, it just jumps, and it goes, and it's off someplace else. So all of these little stories, all of these little parables, they're all kind of telling us the same thing. They are telling us that undisciplined mind, untrained mind, tends to wander from here to there to there to there. But it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. As human beings, we have the ability to be aware of thoughts, to be aware of them. Now, interestingly enough, I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. I was reading a book by a Western philosopher of consciousness. I didn't even know such a thing existed. But nevertheless, this gentleman was a PhD, and he wrote a book. I can't remember his name right now, but the title of the book was The Centered Mind. And I started to read it, but it was above my head in technical terms that a psychologist might be aware of, and I am not. But the author's premise is that the actual thought process, the actual process by which thoughts come to us, happens outside of our field of awareness. So we'll say, well, I'm thinking of this, or I'm thinking of that, or, you know, I just had an idea, but we really don't know how that thinking occurs. We really don't know how getting that idea occurs. It seems as if they kind of drop into our field of awareness from somewhere, and we see them, you know, and we say, oh, I just had an idea. I just had an idea. So imagine you're kind of looking at your computer screen, and you've got a screensaver going, and every once in a while it brings up a different quote. You know, if you've ever had a screensaver that does that, and it just kind of floats across the screen and moves around, and then it disappears, and then a little while later another one comes up. And as he explained it, that's the image that I got. That kind of, we become aware. So we, whatever we are the one that is aware, and we become aware of these thoughts. We become aware of these ideas, but we really don't know where they came from. We really don't know how they were generated. It's interesting. I don't want to go too far afield with that, but if you think about that, and you think about what Henry Stapp tells us in quantum physics, and if you think about what psychologists tell us and motivational speakers will tell us, it is our intention. It is our intention that is important. If we intend to have an idea about something, we tend to have ideas about something. We become aware of information that pertains to our intention. In Stapp's explanation of quantum physics, you know, it is the intention of the observer that causes the quantum field to collapse into that observable point. And I've got to tell you that I just repeated what Dr. Stapp said. I don't know that I quite understand it. Right? But it is our intention. It is our desire. It is what we want to experience that somehow attunes our field of awareness to these different ideas. So coming back then to what we are and what our purpose might be, and where we're going today with this discussion of commitment and persistence and practice, is that the tools that we have been given are the tools of consciousness, the tools of awareness. We can become aware. We don't have to become aware, but we can become aware of this process that we call thinking, of this process that we call thought, of this process of different things just popping into our field of consciousness. And we have choice. We have will, we have volition, we have choice. We don't have to follow that stray dog. We don't have to follow that wandering dog. We don't have to be like the grasshopper that flits from place to place. We can become aware. See, we can become aware of that. And we can say, oh look, oh look, wandering dog, wandering dog. Oh look, there goes that dog again. And we don't have to engage. We don't have to follow. We don't have to be sucked in, so to speak. And this goes for our emotions as well. And this becomes more difficult, I think, for people because the emotions tend to take place, excuse me, at a level that is different than our conscious awareness. You know? So it's easier, I think, for us to say, oh, I just had an idea. I just had an idea. Even though we may not know the process by which the idea came to us, we become aware of the fact that we just had a thought, or we just had an idea, or it just occurred to me, or you know what popped into my head, right? All of these little idioms that we use to try to explain that which we really don't understand. But it's not so easy for us to be as honest with our emotions. It's not so easy for us to say, oh look, there's anger. Oh look, there's greed. Oh look, there's fear. See, we tend to more accept the emotions that are taking place as being our true state of being. I am angry. I am afraid, you see. But with time we can learn to just observe them as well. Just observe them as well. So our growth as human, as spiritual beings, our growth in simplest terms consists of us utilizing the ability that we have of discernment, of knowing. So we can become aware that things are popping into our awareness, but we can then know that we don't have to engage them. We don't have to get caught up in them. Now watch the language in society. Watch the I don't even know that we can call it a discussion. It's not really a discussion, but it's the information that gets flooded back and forth in front of our field of awareness through social media, through the news, through conversations at the water cooler, through all these kind of things. And just observe how often people will say, I had no choice. I didn't have a choice. I had to do that. That was the only thing that could be done in this situation. And if you stop and think about it, yeah, they had a choice. There's always a choice. There's always a choice. But what we tend to do as human beings is we tend to rationalize and justify our actions by saying, well, we didn't have any other choice. We had to do this. listen to our politicians of every side of the aisle, it doesn't matter, but listen to our politicians when they go and do something that's difficult. They say, well, we didn't have a choice. We didn't have a choice. We went to war with this particular country because we didn't have a choice. And if you look back, that's seldom the case. That is seldom the case. There was something else going on, see? But that's what they decided to do, and they rationalized it by saying we did not have a choice. It was the only thing that we could do. So we as human beings, and I'm not picking on other people, I'm talking about me, I'm talking about us. We as human beings, we have to be careful because of this tendency that we have to follow the wandering dog. And so we didn't have any choice, you know. I didn't have any choice but to do that because that's where the dog took me, and I didn't have any choice. And at some point we've got to stop and say, we've been given will, we've been given volition, we've been given the freedom to choose, but we didn't exercise it. Once we declare that, once we say I did not exercise it, I didn't exercise my choice very well there. See, then what happens to us is we start to shift out of this, in many cases, self-imposed role of choicelessness, of kind of being a victim of our own emotions and our own thoughts. And now we start to shift into the position where we can be the observer of them, at least. Just the observer. We don't have to become engaged. So our tendency to wander, our tendency to be easily distracted, our tendency to go from one thing to another is something that the marketing and advertising salespeople, it's what they depend upon, you know. Because coupled with that is there seems to be this propensity in our culture. We're taking a shortcut. We're finding the easier way, you know. What we want to do is we want to find an easier way, a quicker way. So what we tend to do is we'll tend to decide that we want to do something. For example, let's say physical fitness. We'll decide that we want to do something, and we will start on some particular path, whatever it may be. I mean, and just go ahead and go back. You know, back there was a question on Jeopardy the other night about the largest selling videotape in the 80s. What was it? And it was a fitness tape. VHSs were pretty new, and people were buying these videotapes and popping them in and getting out in front of their TV set. Or at least that was their intention. I don't know. A lot of them are probably still in the wrapper in a box somewhere. But that was their intention, you see. And then you had all the infomercials. Can you think of all of the different infomercials we have seen over the years for some different type of fitness regimen or fitness product, you know, or pill? You know, you just take this pill and you'll lose weight. Doesn't matter what you eat, doesn't matter what you drink, doesn't matter if you exercise. Just take this pill, okay? And this pill will do it all for you. Of course, it works better if you do diet and exercise with it, but just take the pill and send us the 3 easy payments of $99.99 plus postage and handling. So what tends to happen is people will start on one path, and they will go with it a little ways, and then all of a sudden another path will appear, and somebody will say, well, you know, you shouldn't be doing that, you should be doing this, you know. And they say, oh, really? So they stop doing that, and they go over to do this, and of course then they take all of the stuff that they bought for the first one and try to sell it on Craigslist, and they go over to the second one and they buy all new paraphernalia for whatever this new discipline might be. And then they get tired of that, and then they go over and they try another one, you know. Now, part of that is we have to find the one that's right for us. There's you know, I'm not saying just whatever the next infomercial comes on TV, just go ahead and order that and stick with it. Part of it is we have to find the one that appeals to us, because that's the one that we will stay with. But we have to stay with something. We have to persist. We have to be committed to stay with something long enough to produce the results that we're looking for. Because what happens is, while we are going over here and doing this and going over here and doing that and going over there and doing another thing, we're not moving forward. We're moving laterally. We're moving sideways. So we feel like we might be moving forward, and we may be moving forward slightly, but we are not moving forward as far or as fast as if we chose one path and stayed with it. So there's no shortage of snake oil salesmen out there who are out making infomercials, who are going to promise you the moon if you just buy their product and send in their payments and put their app on your phone and all these sorts of things. And what we eventually must learn is no one can do it for us. If we are not willing to do the work ourselves, no one is going to be able to do it for us. I even saw a commercial for a machine that exercises your muscles for you while you watch TV. It's got these little electrodes, and you put them on your muscles, and it pulses electricity through your muscles, and it makes your muscles contract. And the promise is that this is going to exercise your body for you without you having to work. There are no shortage of people who will tell you that they can do it for you, but they can't. They can't. Sooner or later, you're going to have to do it yourself. And this applies directly when we bring it over from the world of the physical into the world of our spiritual practice. In the world of our spiritual practice, our spiritual growth is often likened to ascending a mountain, ascending the mountain, going up the mountain. Moses went up the mountain and spoke directly to God and received the 10 Commandments. And this idea of going up the mountain is an idea of rising in consciousness. It's not a physical climbing the mountain sort of thing. It is a rising in consciousness. Now that's a very important metaphor that we have to stop for a minute and consider. What we have to do, what you and I have to do on our spiritual path, in our progress, is we have to bring our consciousness, the I that observes, the one that follows the dog, we have to bring that consciousness up to divine consciousness. And so often what we in our different practices and different teachings and all these different things try to do is to get us to figure out how to bring God down to our level. God is already here, but the consciousness of the divine is not always expressed here. We're not always aware of it here. So we are trying to bring our consciousness to its level. We are trying to see and feel and experience life as the divine does, not as the wandering dog does, you see. Joel Goldsmith gives us a wonderful visual on that. He said, if you went into an office building in a big city and you had a meeting on the 28th floor, you would go over to the bank of elevators in the lobby and you'd press the call button, and when the elevator came, you would step in the elevator and you would press 28 and the doors would close. He said, now then what would happen is the elevator would rise up to the 28th floor. He says, it's not like the elevator would stand still and the building would come down 28 stories around the elevator. And he says, to think that that would happen would be ridiculous. The elevator must rise up to where we're trying to get to, which is the 28th floor. And in our spiritual practice, what he's getting to is many times what we're trying to do is to get God to make our human experience a better experience for us. Janis Joplin, buy me a Mercedes-Benz. Those sorts of things. And what we must realize is that our spiritual progress is about ascending the mountain. It is about us working with the only thing that we have, which is our consciousness, and moving up, rising up to the awareness of the divine, rising up to the awareness of the unity of life, to the oneness of it all, to the goodness of it all, to move above the fray, so to speak, Think of the images that they take from the International Space Station as it's going around the Earth, and they look down over a tremendous storm. You can, if it's night, you can see the lightning flashing through the clouds. If it's day, you can see the cyclone swirling. You can see all that, And for the people up on the space station, they're totally unaffected by it. The people down underneath that storm, they're having a heck of a go of it, Torrential rains and winds and floods and all these kind of things. So depending upon where you are is the experience that you're having. And the spiritual experience is we want to rise above all of the distractions of the ordinary day, all the distractions of the wandering dog, and we want to be in that place of peace. That is the place where we experience the very love of God. So this metaphor then of going up to the mountaintop, rising up the mountain in terms of our spiritual growth has been with us a long time. And one of the things that we're told is that when you're at the bottom of the mountain and there's a path right there in front of you, it seems like that's the only path. That's the only path that's there. So we start to take it. But the closer and closer you get to the top of the mountain, and when you eventually get to the top of the mountain, you come to realize that there were many paths. There were many paths coming up that mountain. And they all led to the same place. Now, just like the example of us starting an exercise program and thinking, well, I'm going to stop this one and go do this one, or I'm going to stop that one and go do the other one. We sometimes start on a path and then we go up it and we say, oh, well, there's another path over there. I'm going to just take a shortcut, you see. I'm going to take a shortcut and I'm going to go through the woods and I'm going to go over to this other path. And we start for a little while on that path and not exactly sure where it's going, but, it seems okay for a while. And then we see another one. We say, oh, look, I see there's people over there. There's people over in the distance over there. Now I'm going to go down through this little gully that separates us, and I'm going to come up the other side, and I'm going to get on that other path. See, and we do that, and we flit from one thing to another thing to another thing to another thing. Now, as I said, part of that is we have to find the one that's right for us. So part of it is that search, but another part is distraction. Another part is the intellect taking us away from the thing that we want. We wish to ascend the mountain to the experience of the presence of God, in which place the ego and its creation, the intellect, and its creation, the ego, won't be as they are now. And they resist. They resist by distracting us. Oh, look, let's go over here. Oh, look, let's go over there. Or by bringing up emotion and giving us things to be afraid of, things to be angry about. So we'll get upset and we'll go off over here and we will engage in some type of a struggle. Because while we are emotionally committed to that struggle, we are not emotionally committed to our growth. Just watch what's going on in politics today and see how much of it requires something to struggle with or struggle against or to fight against or to prevail against. And all of those things people easily get emotionally engaged in. And all of those things tend to serve as a distraction oh, I'm supposed to be climbing the path. I'm supposed to be ascending the mountain. So we have an understanding a little bit of what it is that we want to do and the tools that we have to do it. So what we want to do is we want to use the tools that we have in order to let our consciousness rise above all of the wanderings and distractions and all of those things. We want a disciplined mind. Dr. Holmes tells us that trained thought is infinitely more powerful than untrained. We want to learn to avoid following the wandering dog. We want to learn to avoid the intellectual curiosities and the emotional distractions that serve to take us away from our purpose. I'm walking the path. I'm walking the path. So the first thing we have to do is we have to be committed. We have to be committed to this. Are you committed to your spiritual growth? I'm not saying what path to take. You're going to have to find that one yourself. But are you committed to it? Is this something that you really are dedicated to? Is it something that you would do no matter what, you know? Again, the East gives us the example of seeking God as if you'd be seeking a pond if your hair was on fire. Are you committed to it? Is this something that you really, truly want to do? And if not, what would it take? What would it take in order to feel that commitment, you know? See, many times we come to the spiritual truth and we start to see it and feel it and hear it and it feels good and we like it, but not yet. Say, not yet. It was Augustine who said, "Oh God, make me good, but not yet." Not yet. He was still having too much fun in the ways of the world. Not yet. But there comes a time when it has to be now. Now is the time. We are the people, in the words of Hillel. Without any context, we just have those words. We have to be committed. We have to understand that the most important thing that we can do with these lives that we have is our spiritual growth. We have to be willing, you know, in the terms of the Founding Fathers, to commit our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honors to this purpose. One of the things that can help us is to ask and answer the question of what value does this have to us? Why is it important to us? We can turn to others as examples, you know, and see what it is that they had to say about the value of their experience. But ultimately, we have to choose to have our own experience. Remember, I said religion is belief in somebody else's experience. Spirituality is having our own. And at some point, we can read the words of those who have gone before us. We can understand what they said, but at some point, we have to want that for ourselves. We have to truly be committed to ourselves. We have to decide, okay, I've tried different paths. I've gone laterally from side to side. I've even gone backwards and downhill from time to time. But now I realize that I must pick a path and I must commit to it and I must stay with it. I will not be fooled by distractions that say, come over here. This is a shortcut. I don't know if you remember the Jason and the Argonauts. We had to study that in high school, and there was a section in there about the sirens, the sirens that lured the sailors, the three sisters that lured the sailors to their deaths on the rocks, you know. And Lori and I were in Europe some years ago when we were traveling, and could actually see, when we were driving around one of the coasts, could actually see this formation that they called the Three Sisters, these three rock formations that were out in the Mediterranean. And I understood the mythology, you know, that they were telling these sailors a story that said, don't come over here, you'll be, you know, don't take this shortcut, because it looked like If you were in a ship coming around that coast, it looked like that was the passage, but if you went that way, you would wind up on the rocks. You needed to stay the course a little bit further. Don't be fooled. Don't be lured by what looks like the easier way, but stay the course and then go around and you'll have safe passage. And that's what happens to us in our growth is we have to say, I will not be fooled. I will not be distracted. I will not be pulled off of my path by the lure of a shortcut. So just like there are people who will tell us that, if we buy their product, if we enroll in their fitness program, if we buy their tapes and drink their protein shakes and whatever else it is, that we will achieve fitness quicker. There's no shortage of folks who tell us that they know a shortcut on the spiritual path. And it comes down to the same thing. You have to do the work yourself. Nobody can do the work for you. And you don't need a lot of fancy equipment to do it. I was thinking about this morning, of all the different training apparatus, machines, and different things that they have to exercise with. When I was in the Army, the only piece of equipment we had was a horizontal ladder, that we would swing through. They called them ladders, but they were like monkey bars, like you see in a children's playground. And they stood outside the mess hall. And every day, 3 times a day, when you went to eat, the way that you got into the mess hall was you had to swing your way through those ladders. So when we first got there and we first started doing it, there were a lot of guys who couldn't do it. They would get halfway across and they would drop off. The sergeant would make them go back, and if you didn't go through the ladders, you didn't eat. That was it. Some would try to drop off and sneak around, and get caught and be sent back. But that was the only piece of equipment that we had. Everything else was gravity. Push-ups, sit-ups, calisthenics, running, and marching. I think we went for a period of 2 weeks where we didn't walk anywhere. We ran everywhere we went. That was it. Just double time everywhere we went. And they got us in great shape. But we didn't need a lot of special equipment. We just had to work with what we had. And in our spiritual progress, in our spiritual growth, then, once we make our commitment, we must be persistent in using what we have. We must be persistent. And painstakingly persistent is what Dr. Holmes called it. Stubbornness is what he called it. He said we must be stubborn to see things as they are. We must be stubborn to see the spiritual truth. We must be stubborn, persistent. We must refuse to be fooled by the things that would sway us from our determination to catch God being God, to experience the love and the presence of God right here and right now. So that means we don't do it just a little bit here and a little bit there, once on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock, and then maybe Wednesday nights, Persistence. Every second of every minute of every day. And the way that we can do this, of course, we have to get started, right? So we have to get started. So typically when we're starting something new like that, we set a time for it. When are you going to do this? So I'm going to do my spiritual practice. When are you going to do your spiritual practice? What time? And usually what you find is you have to make the time by stopping something else. Whether it means getting up early or going to bed late, or whether it means that we give up a half hour of TV or something. We have to be committed enough to be dedicated to make that time, And the simplest thing to do is find the thing that is your greatest distraction and give that up. And then you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Now you're moving into a time that you can set aside for your spiritual practice. Consistency. How often are we going to do that? Once a day? Twice a day? Once a week is not enough. We have to recognize that the rate at which we ascend the mountain, how quickly we get to the top, is in direct proportion to how much time we spend in our spiritual practice. The two go together. It's just like exercise. How fast is your body going to change? Well, how much exercise are you doing? How fast is your spirit going to grow? How much spiritual practice are you doing? And doing. And persisting. And doing. We must stay with it. We must stay with it. We can't start, do it for a week or so, stop, go back to it for a week or so, stop, go back to it for a week or so. We do that, we're starting over and over and over and over. It's like going to the bottom of the mountain. It's like chutes and ladders, like going to the bottom of the mountain, walking up a little bit, sliding back down the bottom, walking up a little bit, sliding back down the bottom. Consistency, persistence, moving forward, 1 foot at a time. And the practice is a practice that we each have to find the one that works for us, or the ones that work for us. We may have to mix things up a little bit as we're going forward until we find something we will stay with. In the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, there are 112 different meditation techniques in there. And meditation is a most important technique because it teaches us to stop following the wandering dog. It teaches us that we can observe the dog wandering, but we don't have to go with it. That's the first big step, is awareness. But the idea is that there are 112 different techniques. Find one that you like and stay with it. And when it stops working, find another of the 112 that you like and stay with it. And when it stops working, you find another, you see. And another. And this isn't changing paths. This is kind of adjusting your pace along the path. They're all essentially doing the same thing. Some meditation techniques, we focus on one thing. Other meditation techniques, we observe thoughts. We have to find the practice that works for us. Spiritual mind treatment is a very definite technique, a very definite practice that teaches us to start first with thinking about what we know about God, and then unifying with that, then saying, and that includes me. Right? It is a process that takes practical life and has us use it in a daily way to bring us into that communion, into that contact. Affirmations might be another practice. Visualizations might be another practice. But what the practice is, we have to find something that we are going to stay with and stay with it. Stay with it. And then what we eventually find is that our life becomes our practice. Because every minute of every day we have the opportunity to be mindful, to be here now, to be in the presence of God now. Because love is all around us. We haven't seen it because we've been paying attention to the wandering dog. I want to leave you with this story that comes to us from Zen Buddhism. And it's a story of where do sweet persimmons come from? Where do sweet persimmons come from? Now, I had no knowledge of this because I don't know for sure that I've ever had a persimmon. Must have, but I just can't remember it. There are sweet persimmons and there are sour persimmons. And by and large, there are many, many, many more sour persimmons than there are sweet ones. So when we get a hold of a sweet persimmon, we have to say, well, where did this come from? See, why is this one sweet and all the others are sour? And if you take a sweet persimmon, if you get a sweet persimmon and you think, I'm going to save it, I'm going to save the seeds and I'm going to plant these seeds, and when the new persimmon tree grows, it'll have sweet persimmons on it. See? When we do that, what we find is that the tree that grows produces sour persimmons. Now think about that. A sour persimmon will grow a sour persimmon, and a sweet persimmon will grow a sour persimmon. Where then do sweet persimmons come from? And what some smart person figured out is that when a persimmon tree persists and gets very, very old, the persimmons turn sweet. And what they then do is they take the limb off of a sweet persimmon tree, because that tree is very old and it will die, and they graft that limb onto a sour persimmon tree. And once the graft takes hold and that limb starts growing, here you have sweet persimmons growing on a sour persimmon tree. Persistence, persistence. There's no shortcut. You're not going to get sweet persimmons by taking a shortcut. Our spiritual growth is like that. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes commitment. It takes persistence. It takes practice. We must do it. We must decide to do it and commit to that. We must set aside a time and resources to do it, and we must do it. We must do it. Over time, the persimmons in our life will turn from sour to sweet. And so it is. Alrighty, I think I didn't bring the book that Reverend Laurie got for me, so we will have our own closing treatment today. So let us come together in this spirit of commitment, of persistence, and of practice. And let us recognize that God is committed to us because we are part of it. It is persistent in its love for us. It is persistent in its caring for us. It is persistent in its self-givingness to us. It is our purpose to be more aware of it, to consciously unify with it, to let our consciousness and to cause our consciousness to rise up to the complete oneness, the complete unity, the unconditional love that is God. So today we are committed to releasing and letting go of everything and anything we have allowed to get in the way. We are committed to choosing our path and walking it. We make time and space as a place to do our spiritual practice. And we do it. And we do it. We release and let go of every and any desire to look for a shortcut. We are willing to keep putting one foot forward in front of the other, knowing that our arrival at the mountaintop is inevitable. We are grateful for this opportunity to be together today to share these ideas. And we release this treatment to the perfect law, knowing so certainly it is done, that we stay together. And so it is.